If you've been following the computer news over the last several weeks, months, and dare I say, even years, you've probably asked yourself on more than one occasion, what in the heck is going on at Mozilla? The makers of Firefox seem to have lost the gosh darn minds. But I think if you sit down for a moment and look at the events and actions over the last several months of Mozilla, a clear pattern begins to form. You can begin to connect the dots and see with relative clarity exactly what they're planning and what the future holds for Firefox and the rest of the Mozilla Foundation. So let's walk through the last few months here, and I think you'll see exactly what I'm saying. Let's go back to February 1st. This came out actually yesterday. Yesterday, we got information about, the London Journal broke this news, about a lawsuit against Mozilla by the person who is their chief product officer at Mozilla and who is being groomed to be the CEO of Mozilla, to take over for the then current CEO. Well, I'm going to scroll down here just a little bit to give you guys who are watching the video ones a visual to look at of exactly what I'm reading here. As of February 1st of this year, the sitting CEO of Mozilla was fired, right? Mitchell Baker, who had been the CEO for a while and had been the executive chairperson of the board of directors for Mozilla for quite some time, was fired unexpectedly, right? It came out of nowhere. It just happened, spur of the moment. It was not, according to everything we've heard, planned in any way. It was sort of an emergency firing, and it occurred on or around February 1st. Now, what was happening on February 1st? Well, the person who was supposed to take over the CEO role was set to come back from medical leave. So that person had been on medical leave for a couple months and was set to come back right around February 1st. Before that person had the opportunity to come back, the board of directors of Mozilla got together in an emergency setting, fired without any warning the current CEO, and instilled one of their own board members as the new CEO, basically making sure that that person who had been groomed to become the CEO would never have the chance to be. Now, who was that person? The person who was supposed to become the CEO was the chief product officer. The chief product officer was the person that basically the vast majority of the company already reported to. If you worked on all the different products and whatnot and Firefox and all that stuff within Mozilla, you reported up through this chief product officer. So why then was the current CEO, Mitchell Baker, fired so abruptly? Well, according to every report we've got, it was because of performance concerns. Performance concerns. That is the wildest thing I can think of. And the reason that just doesn't make any sense is if you look at the compensation of that CEO, Mitchell Baker, over the last several years, the board of directors continually were so confident in Mitchell Baker that they continue to reward her with ever increasing, nay, skyrocketing compensation, to the point where it went up by about $2 million every year. I don't know about you, but I've never gotten a $2 million a year raise every year, to the point where it got up to $6.9 million as of the most recent IRS filing, which was, 2022. So we don't even know how much she made in 2023. It could be even more than that. But as of 2022, the board of directors was like, wow, the CEO is doing awesome. Here's almost $7 million for being so awesome. They just kept rewarding her performance over and over and over again. And then they fired her. What? For performance issues? You don't continually give someone constant streams of multi-million-dollar raises and then fire them for performance issues when, if you look at the market share and whatever demographics we know about the income of Mozilla and Firefox, it doesn't seem like there was any significant downturn here. Now, I've had some complaints about market share performance and whatnot with Firefox over the years, and I think many of you have shared those complaints. But none of them have changed. There's nothing new that has occurred. Certainly nothing new that would warrant an emergency, spur-of-the-moment, absolutely no warning CEO dismissal and firing. That hardly ever happens. You always have an overlap. You never fire the CEO and instill a new CEO if things are going okay, but the performance isn't great. No. You have an overlap always, so that there's a transition period. So that means that the board of directors for Mozilla was absolutely desperate to make sure one of two things happened. Either A, the incoming CEO, the current chief product officer who was groomed to be the CEO, that he not be CEO at all costs, or B, that they needed someone else specific, possibly one of their own board members, to be CEO for a very important reason, or possibly both. So on February 8th, it was then announced publicly that this had all taken place. Of course, they downplayed the whole fact that there was basically a giant coup by the board where they overthrew a CEO, kicked out a person who was going to become CEO, and instilled one of their own members into the CEO position. They completely glossed over that bit. But on February 8th, they announced that to the public. Okay, but why did that happen? Well, to understand that, let's look a little bit at the CEO that got installed, right? The board member of Mozilla that got installed to be the new CEO, spur of the moment, without any notice to the previous CEO, to the person who was groomed to become CEO, or to the rest of the company, was a woman named Laura Chambers. Now, Laura Chambers isn't really a tech person. She's worked at a variety of companies, including companies that are tech companies. She worked for Airbnb, she worked for eBay, she worked for PayPal, and before eBay and PayPal, she spent a couple months at Skype. But she apparently didn't like that job because she went right back to eBay and PayPal. And before that, she worked for a company called McKinsey & Company. And McKinsey & Company, we're not going to get into the details of it right now, but they're not exactly a non-controversial firm. Lots of issues with drug stuff and all sorts of things. McKinsey & Company, controversial, to say the least. But the important thing here is that Laura Chambers, in her roles at all of these various companies, was not a tech person, right? She's not a technical person. She works on the business side of things. She sits on boards of things, and she's kind of more high level, okay? That's just important to note as we're going into this. She has no experience with Mozilla other than in 2021, she was put onto the board of directors. So what happened after that, though? Once she got instilled into office, what occurred? Well, new versions of Firefox came out. Okay, well, what's so notable about that? New versions of Firefox get released every third day that ends with a Y. We're literally up to version, 127 or 128 right by now? Seriously, it's a lot of versions of Firefox. Well, on May 14th, Firefox version 126 was released. Now, May 14th, if we're looking at it now, that's February, March, April, May. 3 months after Laura Chambers became CEO, a new version of Firefox came out. What was in this new version of Firefox? Telemetry. I'm going to read this exact quote here because the exact wording is critically important. Telemetry was added to create an aggregate count of searches by category to broadly inform search feature development. These categories are based on 20 high-level content types, such as sports, business, and travel. This data will not be associated with specific users and will be collected using OHTTP to remove IP addresses and potentially identifying metadata. Okay. Quote, this is an important bit here. no profiling will be performed. And this is the really big bit, so hold on to this one. No data will be shared with third parties. Okay, well, that seems good. If you've got a web browser that happens to be collecting data about what you're searching for and looking at, which Firefox now is, you don't want them sharing that data with others, right? You want to think that, oh, they're being a good steward of your data, right? Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of my browser collecting any of my data, but if they are, you want to hope that they're being a good steward with it. They're being secure about it. They're storing it in anonymous ways, and they're not sharing it with third parties. Okay, fine. So Mozilla is now collecting data. If you're looking at information about sports or travel, let's say you want to book a trip to Hawaii, Mozilla is now collecting that data, but they're not giving it to a third party. Well, what happens if they want to sell that to, say, an advertising company? According to what their statement is, they won't do that. Now, that's just a promise. That's not like a contract they've signed. They can break that promise at any time. But if they want to keep their promise and say that they won't give that information to third parties, but they still want to use that information to sell advertising, they should buy an advertising company. And lo and behold, on June 16th, 1 month later, it turns out that, they'd been planning for a while to buy an advertising broker company. Anonym is the advertising company they purchased. And Anonym is essentially an ad broker. And the whole point of Anonym is that they're doing ad brokering where they're going to be good stewards of your data. In fact, their wording is very similar to that of Mozilla in how they're going to handle your data. They're going to have some level of privacy, they're going to have some level of encryption, and they're going to be good stewards of the data they do have, right? Secure environments, some anonymized analytics, and differential privacy algorithms. These algorithms add noise to the data, protecting it from being traced back to individual users. A variety of things along these lines. And some of that seems good, right? Okay, if you're going to have advertising, you want to have as much anonymity as possible so that your personal data isn't being collected and sold. However, in this case, what's really happening here is now Mozilla is, with Firefox, collecting your user data, right, of what you're looking at, of what you're searching for, and selling advertisements to you based on that information. They're not sending it to a third party. They're sending it to their first party, to themselves, right? So they're holding true to that exact same promise. They're just using that data for themselves to advertise to you, which means that realistically now Mozilla is an advertising company. And I just want to point this out. Anonym, the company they bought, came out of Facebook. A couple of executives from Facebook, now Meta, started Anonym just a couple of years ago. And realistically, there doesn't look to be a whole lot of product in their portfolio. So it remains to be seen exactly, because if you try to go use Anonym's products, there's nothing really there. Their website is just almost like a template placeholder website. So we don't know on the outside how much has been developed, what business deals have already been signed. We don't know that information. We know that there are multiple venture capital firms, including Griffin Gaming Partners, red flag there, Northwest Venture Partners, and Heracles Capital. And there are some troubling other investments that all three of those make when you combine them together with advertising and Firefox. But let's assume good intentions all around there, and that those troubling connections really don't have any bearing on why Mozilla picked up Anonym. Let's just say that they picked up Anonym for the face value change of making Mozilla into an advertising company, where they collect your data with Firefox, advertise to you using their new Anonym business division into Firefox. Interesting. Now, what does that really mean? Well, that really means that you now are presented with a scenario where the two major web browsers are fundamentally the same have the same proposition here. Let me walk you through this. Let's say you want to use Google Chrome. How would you describe, in a very high-level elevator pitch, Google Chrome to someone else? Well, it is a mostly open source, not completely, but 99.9999% open source web browser owned and developed by an advertising company. Because that's what Google is. They're an advertising company funded by advertising. and they develop a web browser which helps them to collect more data and to advertise to you. Okay. So how would you describe Firefox then? Well, now you describe it in the exact same way. It is a mostly open source web browser owned by an advertising company. And before any of you stop me and say mostly open source, Lunduk, Firefox is totally open. It's not. Firefox is not totally open source. Mozilla and Firefox include encrypted extensions specifically around DRM that are all closed source. So it has closed source components just like Google Chrome does. They're not the exact same closed source components, but it's pretty doggone close. And now here we are in a situation where both Google Chrome and Mozilla Firefox are fundamentally described in the exact same way. The difference between the two is almost poof, gone. So is that why the previous incoming chief product officer was given essentially the boot? He was given a demotion, told he couldn't become CEO, even though that was the whole plan all along. That person, I'm going to read a quote to you actually. His name is Steve Teixeira. I pronounced this wrong repeatedly over the last 24 hours. It's spelled Teixeira, and my inability to pronounce the vast majority of words caused me to pronounce it wickedly wrong. But I believe it's Teixeira. I spoke to him briefly, and he provided the following quote. Quote, "The bottom line is that I just wanted to continue to do the job I was successful at and contribute to the mission I believe in. Mozilla's treatment was baffling and hurtful. I didn't want it to come to this, but I will not allow Mozilla to break the law." So that was the statement he provided to the Lunduk Journal yesterday, based on the lawsuit that he's got going against Mozilla. That combined with what his role was, where as the chief product officer, where 75% of the Mozilla organization all reported into him, would suggest to me that he wanted to continue doing what he'd been doing, right? Developing Firefox, developing the various other products that Mozilla was trying to get off the ground, right? So they did not want him in that position. They wanted someone else in the CEO position controlling where this went. And immediately, once that change was made, once that coup occurred, they began adding telemetry and data collection into Firefox, purchased an advertising company, and what's next? I mean, think about it seriously. What comes next? Well, the next step is adding that advertising functionality directly into Firefox and Firefox-related search portals and other web services. That's the next step, right? Because Firefox and Mozilla is clearly transitioning into an advertising company in a very, very pointed and directed way. They've made multiple statements about how advertising is the way of funding the web. They've made these statements. Let me see if I've got them here. Not there, not there. It's in here somewhere. When they did their announcement, they made a very clear state. The online advertising industry is undergoing a significant transformation with growing consumer concerns and scrutiny. We are at the forefront in a pivotal shift on how privacy and advertising coexist, reshaping the digital landscape for advertisers, platforms, and consumers. They're really pushing forward advertising as the monetization path for Mozilla. So that's where we're going with this. So what seems to have happened over the last few months? The Mozilla board, overseeing a $1 billion company, Make no mistake, Mozilla is a billion-dollar company. Let me see if I can show you this here. Billion. There you go. As of 2 years ago, they had 1 point something billion dollars in total assets. They're a billion-dollar company with bringing in over $600 million per year. I mean, it's massive, massive company. Their board of directors decided, and this is how what I'm reading into this, that they wanted to move in a distinctly advertising-focused direction. They wanted, and possibly somewhere else that we don't know of yet. And they saw the current CEO and the potential replacement to that current CEO as not someone who they could control effectively to accomplish that goals. They ousted them, both of those people, and installed someone from the existing board of directors, someone who came up through McKinsey and Company, that they could control, or that was overseeing it all, one of the two. And they push forward on this new advertising strategy. That's what it seems to be. That seems to be where when you connect all the dots, what the picture seems to be forming. Now, it's an interesting question. When you think about all of this happening, how are the various, let's say, Linux distributions of the world that ship, many of them, Firefox by default, how do they respond? When the web browser that they're shipping is now primarily an advertising platform, do they continue to ship that web browser? If not, what do they move to? Now, luckily, there are many open source web browsers and based on a variety of different engines, mostly two, but that's slowly changing. Do they change though? Do they change completely? And what does that do to Mozilla and Firefox's market share if a bunch of Linux distributions drop Firefox as an option? I see a lot of chaos and tumultuousness, very rocky seas ahead for both Mozilla and people who use Firefox. We'll see how it goes. But this is what I'm seeing based on the information we have thus far. And I think it's important that we understand where this is going. I would love to hear from Mozilla on all of this. I don't think that we will. I'm waving my hands around wildly right now to smack the microphone. I don't think that we will. Mozilla tends to stay pretty private and secretive about everything. I mean, every single time I have a news story, I reach out before and after I publish the stories to say, hey, do you have a comment on this? Do you have corrections around this? Is there anything you'd like to add to this? I would love to hear what your thoughts are. And every time it's met with total silence and crickets. I also highly doubt that we're going to see much in the way of pushing from most tech press around a lot of these issues. Now, luckily, over the last, 2-3 years, the Lunduk Journal has pushed enough on this that, by and large, the nerdy public is very aware of what's going on with Mozilla. And because of that, we've begun to see little trickling bits of coverage around some of the issues that have come up, such as the crazy compensation of the Mozilla CEO up until now. Millions and millions of dollar raises, just wild compensation, right? So we have seen some of that, but the majority of these topics, most tech press aren't going to touch. And in fact, I don't think to date, over the last 24, 36 hours, since the story of of this lawsuit broke by the Lunduk Journal, of the lawsuit from the chief product officer against Mozilla, I don't think a single other tech news outlet has even touched it. Not yet. Not at all. I mean, to be fair, it's confirmed at this point. I have confirmation from Steve Teixeira, who brought the lawsuit against Mozilla, that the coverage here appears, my interpretation appears to be pretty well correct. And just the same, I don't think that any other outlet's going to really touch it too much. And that's a bummer. That's a bummer because I think that the more tech press that does cover this, the more pressure Mozilla will feel to, at the very least, explain their strategy, to talk about their goals and the way that they're operating, to address some of the concerns around all of this. And I know from talking to a few people with inside Mozilla that people internally at the company are not happy. People are concerned about what's going on. Now, a lot of people within Mozilla are just running around swearing about Lunduk right now. I know that. It's fine. I'm used to it. That sort of thing happens. I put out an article about Red Hat, and people inside Red Hat go around and use a lot of four-letter adjectives talking about Lunduk. Same sort of thing happens with Mozilla. It's fine. I get it. It's part of my job. But it does also seem like besides the people that just dislike me and want to swear about me, there are a lot of people, really good people, smart people, good engineers and the like, working at Mozilla that are not happy with the way things are going. I would encourage those of you who are still there, reach out to me. And go to Lunduk.com. Near the top of Lunduk.com, there is a link which shows you detailed instructions on how you can be a whistleblower at your organization while still remaining anonymous and private. How to obtain a completely anonymous and encrypted email address, how to provide data, including large data like big giant files, in an extremely anonymous way and in a secure way, basically to drop the files to me. And I walk you through all of that. The Lunduk Journal does not divulge any sources unless you specifically say, yeah, you can use my name, And if you don't specifically say it's okay to tell people who I am, I don't. That is just a hard and fast rule of the Lunduk Journal. So anyone who would like to reach out to me, things that we're looking for right now, emails, internal documents, statements, anything that shows what is happening within the organization. Because quite frankly, it's entirely possible that some of these dots I'm connecting are incorrect in some way. It doesn't look like it. Most things have been verified multiple ways. However, if you find areas where you're like, no, Lunduk, you got this a little bit wrong, send it over to me. I want to publish that because the goal here is not to be inflammatory. The goal here is not to attack Mozilla. The goal here is to be accurate, to be correct, and to verify it, and to be a good archive of information. So in the future, when people are looking back on this period of time, they can use these articles and the shows that we're producing now to say what was happening at these major corporations, at these major foundations that were moving and shaking and guiding the entirety of the computer industry forward. What was happening in the computer industry at that time? We must get that correct. The accuracy is paramount here. But I want to say thank you to everyone who has provided information to date. I want to say thank you to everyone who has confirmed some of the data that I have had, even if you've wanted to remain completely silent and hands off. Totally understand and respect all of that. And I want to say thank you to all of the subscribers who help make this possible. No money taken from big tech. No money taken from the foundations. No money coming in from Mozilla or Red Hat or Microsoft or Amazon or Oracle or anyone else. Only funded purely by subscribers of individuals like you. If you go to lunduk.locals.com, you can subscribe monthly, yearly. If you go to lunduk.com, you can find more details on all of that, including a bunch of articles and shows and all sorts of stuff. Fun, happy history stuff, heartbreaking tech journalism stuff. It's all over the map. We have a good time here. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.